Welcome back to Project Drive South Africa. So if you watched my last video, you would have known that I was talking about my very own car, which is a Ford Figo 1.4 base spec, which is the Ambiente. I just had a nice casual conversation for my first video, basically, you know, what that car's about, who it might be for, if you're considering it, you know, should you buy it over something like what I've got here today, which is my brother's same year 2014 Polo Vivo, which is operating in a very similar class level. Anyway, I'm also filming in landscape today, which is probably going to be a lot better for most of you. So let's just go into the specs quickly. The average mileage, which is important for a car like this, is 6.2 liters per 100 k's. Compare that with my car's 6.6 liters per 100 k's. So it is definitely marginally better in the Polo, which is a good thing, I suppose, but that's typical Volkswagen refinement for you. And I think that's ultimately what you're going to be paying for with this car, but obviously I'll talk about that a bit later in the drive. The top speed, although it's not a performance vehicle, I thought I should mention it. It's about 171 k's an hour for this particular model, and a 0 to 100 kilometers time of 12.9 seconds. So that's really not too bad. It's peppy enough. It gets you around town. Very similar to the Figo. I think the Figo is actually just like 0.2 of a second less. So if you're talking about drivetrain, it's very similar. But talking about the refinements, we'll come to that later in the drive. 1400 cc's of displacement, as I said, exactly the same as the Ford Figo. Both of these are obviously petrol options, just for all those who are wondering. It's also a 5-speed manual, very similarly geared, I think. So it's making about 55 kilowatts. This is the interesting part. It is definitely making less power, and I think that has a lot to do with the fuel economy overall, why it is a little bit better than my car. They have the exact same fuel tank. They're both 45 liters, and especially with petrol prices increasing these days, it's kind of nice to have the peace of mind that you know your engine, especially in terms of reliability. I think Volkswagen definitely have a higher reliability standard than that of Ford in general, especially with these economy cars. I mean, they're flipping produced them so much. I think this is the most popular car in South Africa. So anyway, someone can fact check me in the comments if they like, but I'm pretty sure that is the case, and that's for good reason. They're very similarly weighted. This, I think, wet weight is 1,049 kilograms, very similar to the Figo. But in terms of boot space, this is quite interesting. So this generation of Polo, it's got about 270 liters. I don't know how much it's increased over the years, but that I'm not sure it could have increased too much, as the actual size of the car stayed pretty similar. But in comparison with the Figo, this is something the Figo definitely has over it. It's got 359 liters of boot space, and that's definitely something I can tell between my car and this one. So why don't we start it up and let's go for a drive. Okay. Right, now talking about the drive, the first thing I want to talk about is the similarities or lack thereof between my car and this one. So last time I talked about the drivetrain in my car being more than enough for the car, but definitely making that comparison by saying that this car is just a more refined experience. The throttle mapping, as it is a drive-by-wire system, which means it's an electronic throttle, is far more refined, which means you get a lot less jerkiness when you're switching between gears. It's much smoother of an acceleration, and ultimately I think you're just going to have a more pleasurable experience if you're just an everyday driver, which is what most of these cars are used for, you know. I mean, especially when young people are getting their first or second car, they're just looking for something with decent fuel economy, decent reliability, and especially with the drivetrain, you know. And this is what you will typically get with a Polo, and I think unfortunately it's also probably why they're stolen so much in South Africa, is they hold their value. They're very good for parts, and ultimately, as I said, a pretty refined experience for the price. I mean, if I floor it, it lets the car get to a higher rev range before it totally opens that throttle, which just gives you a much smoother experience. Whereas, of course, with my car, you would get a lot of just jerk, you know. It would just open it up instantaneously, which I prefer as an enthusiast but for the everyday driver, this is going to give you a much smoother experience. Now, coming to the manual transmission itself, I think that this is also, I'm going to use refinement a lot in this video, so bear with me, but the refinement on this car is quite a lot higher. It's effortless changing gears. I mean, if I want to just go to fifth right now, even up the hill, pretty instant. It's so easy and so simple, you know, you don't even have to think about it. And as I said, that engine's got plenty of power, so it's actually a great matching of powertrains. They've just nailed the drivetrain in this car, actually, I think, especially for the price. So anyway, coming on to other things now, coming on to the handling, which is another important performance metric of a car like this. The suspension. The suspension is really well judged. It's not harsh, crashy at all. Exactly what you would expect for a car like this. So it takes corners as well as you would expect them to. I mean, these are not the grippiest tires. I think they come standard on Continental, like Eco grips or something like that. But you're not really taking this for performance drive, you know. It's kind of just meant to take you around town, and for that, it does the purpose perfectly fine. So yeah, essentially that's pretty much also knocked out of the park. I can't really take it to the cleaners there. It's perfectly fine. So coming on to the steering, which is another important, I suppose, performance metric of the car. It's a bit heavy, actually. I don't really understand what they were thinking with a car like this, where it's supposed to just be easy. Everything else feels easy. The clutch, as I mentioned in a pre-recording of this, is actually very simple to use as well. It's got a nice long throw to it, very easy to get used to, and the pedals in general feel well spaced and just well laid out. But the steering doesn't actually make a lot of sense to me. The on-center feel is pretty much non-existent, so you would expect it to be very light then, like a lot of American cars. But no, actually it weights up a lot, especially in a parking lot. It's actually a bit of a pain in the ass. You kind of expect it to kind of just go about its own business the way you want to go about your business, but it actually kind of makes the experience a bit difficult, a bit annoying, to say the least. So that is definitely not a pro of this car. The Ford Figo definitely has that made there, I would say, in my opinion. But otherwise, whew, okay, I suppose we can talk about how you would place the car on the road. Something that's really strange about this body shape rather, is the fact that you can't really see. I'm not a particularly tall gentleman, but the fact that I can't really see where the front of the car is placed at all times is a little bit concerning. That's something that is definitely better in the Figo. And if you're paying a bit more for, like, you know, peace of mind and thought into a car, especially a car that you're going to be using for years and years to come, I don't understand why they wouldn't just, you know, increase the height of the haunches a bit better. I suppose maybe for aerodynamic reasons they chose not to do that. But anyway, I digress. Let's move on now to things like amenities and the audio system and all the rest of it, because that is definitely very important. So coming onto the audio system itself, I will specify that in this car particularly, my brother has weirdly decided to try and mend it himself and has incidentally broken it. So, but I have a lot of experience with this car, and I can tell you, as an audio enthusiast myself, what it sounds like. I'd have to say it sounds like trash. It's the weirdest thing. I mean, I've been in a few Polo Vivos of this generation, maybe a year older, so you can clearly see they've spent their money, as I said, on things like the drivetrain, the ease of use of the car, and its practicality, and price, of course. But the sound, especially because I think a lot of young people and you know, people want to use a sound system that's fairly high quality. It's got a decent amount of bass, you know, because that's what music kind of has these days. It's just not good enough. I mean, it's really harsh at high volumes. It's very, the clarity is not there at all. If you try to tune it between different songs, it just totally either washes out through really muddy bass, or it's, as I said, gets very harsh on the highs. So you can't really win with it. You're just constantly toggling through menus and menus of a very, you know, rudimentary system here. that sounds pretty terrible. I think if there was one thing I would do with this car instantly is replace the head unit. I think that's what's to blame. I think the speakers themselves are probably fine, but the actual head unit itself and its tuning is absolutely unacceptable. I mean, I don't even know who actually cleared off on that, but it's useless. Anyway, let me not rant on about that too much longer. Let's talk about small positives. The view out the front, although I can't see the haunches, is very good, like a hatchback would be. View out the back is also perfect. The mirrors are well situated. A similar amenity issue that I have with this car in particular, as I do have with my own car, is the fact that its window winders all round. So for this price point, I do get it, and I know why they do it, because you know, it's an economy vehicle. However, things like the Renault Sandero for less money secondhand, and I know that's obviously got its own problems, you know, but they managed to fit 2 front electric window winders, which I think is, in this day and age, essential. I mean, it makes living with the car a lot simpler and ultimately a lot more enjoyable, I think, especially on a hot day like today where you just want to clear both windows at the same time. It makes it very difficult to do so, you know. You're reaching over here trying to do it. It's actually kind of dangerous, and you don't really want window buffeting, of course, but that's kind of what you have to live with. So that is definitely another compromise, so they're kind of even there. I will say, in terms of in storage capacity, so like, you know, like while you're driving the car, or you're using it for you know, you need to put a drink somewhere, or you need to put your sandwich in a cubby hole somewhere here, the glove box is really small. I don't understand. You can kind of just fit the service manual as well as your owner's manual in there fairly okay, but not much else. It has a little storage cubby right in front of you here for some keys, but you will slide around, of course. I will say the quality of the interior in general, though, is, I think, superior to that of my car. They've rubberized the dash, which is really nice. It's not hard plastic. The rest of it, of course, is hard plastic, but you can see there are certain details that they've definitely paid attention to kind of keep the car going for longer, which is really nice that they thought about that. Coming back to the storage, however, it's kind of limited. I really wish the door bins were a lot bigger. They're really not great, honestly. I don't really know what they were thinking. I think maybe in the new generation Polo Vivo, which has the updated body style, that is definitely different. But it's just kind of strange to me how those kind of things aren't really thought through, especially for a car that someone's going to own when they're younger. They're going to travel around maybe the country or the province with it. You know, those kind of things are really important, just to store your water bottles, stuff like that, you know, stuff that's, I don't know, I feel like is really important. So anyway, coming on to, I suppose, a conclusion now, because I've been talking for quite a while. I hope I've kind of covered everything. I think I've covered everything, I suppose, that's important to me. I'll try and answer your comments below. I do check my channel quite often, but something I do want to mention is, overall, it's a really good car. You will definitely be paying on average more per the kilometer range than that of a Ford Figo of the same generation, from what I've experienced. However, there are certain refinements, things like the engine, the transmission, the longevity of the drivetrain, which is really important, and the overall quality of things like the interior will be higher. But if you're looking for things that, I think the Ford Figo just approaches that student living style a little bit better sound system, more interactive drivetrain, just a more interesting car in general. This has got that typical German stodginess, which, if you like that, that's great. You know, like people who like buying Audis, I'm not dissing anybody who likes them, but you know, they make life easy, and that's what this car does pretty well, barring a few things. So if that sounds like your bag, then yeah, I think it's a good way to go. Listen, I'll end this off with a similar way to I did the last time. So if you want to subscribe and hear me talk about cars, I will be updating my video quality and editing when I get the chance to. I'm a student, so you'll just have to bear with me as it goes. But if you enjoy this kind of thing, comment, like, subscribe, all of those things, and hopefully I'll catch you for the next one. Oh wait, cheers.